Hey guys, this is Charles. Let's do AP Macro 2024 FRQ Set 2, number 1. Assume the economy of Moneyland is in equilibrium with an actual unemployment rate that is equal to the natural rate of unemployment. Draw a correctly labeled graph of aggregate demand, short run aggregate, long run aggregate supply, and show the current equilibrium, real output, price level, Y1, PL1, and full employment at YF. So we're just drawing an aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve graph, long run aggregate supply vertical, short run aggregate supply upward sloping, aggregate demand downward sloping. They are coming together right here. We are fully employed. You should just know your natural rate of unemployment is us being fully employed. Now that doesn't mean everybody has a job, because even when we have full employment, what this means is that somewhere between 3 and 5%, the U.S., I think it's 3 to 5% unemployment means we're still fully employed. We know we still have structural and frictional, always, right? We have these two when we're fully employed. So we're just labeling this price level, real GDP on the horizontal. This would be PL1. This would be Y1, check, check, and YF. YF is us always under long run aggregate supply, and that is where we are fully employed right there. So I think we're golden for our graph. That didn't take too long. B, assume that consumer spending in Moneyland decreases from 110 to 100,000 as a result of a decrease in disposable income in Moneyland from 135 to 110. Never seen this kind of question before. Multiple choice, yes, but not FRQ, so this is cool. I'm glad we've got it. Recognize that our marginal propensity to consume, we should just recognize what that is. That is the amount of money in a dollar of disposable income. Your marginal propensity to consume is how much of that dollar you would spend. Your marginal propensity to save would be, well, obviously how much of that money you would save. So we should just know the formula here. It is a change in consumption over a change in income. This is our formula for just finding MPC. Obviously, if it was MPS, it would be just the same change in consumption over a change in income or disposable income specifically. So looks like we went from 110 to 100. That's 10,000 on the top. And 135 to 110, that's 25,000. Simple enough. Let's do a little math here with a calculator so we know we do it right. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Divide 2, 5, 1, 2, 3. And looks like 0.4 or 40%. 40%. Let's get rid of the decimal. I like that. Or no, let's don't. Let's don't do the 40. But in essence, it's saying 40% of any dollar lost or earned. Let's get rid of that. Sorry, give me a second. It's early in the morning here, and I've had too much coffee, I think. 0.4. Let's leave it at 0.4. That is our MPC. Our MPS would be 0.6. We know that anytime these two always have to equal 1. You can only do two things with a dollar. You can spend it or you can save it. If you spend it, that's how much of a dollar you're going to save or spend. This is how much of a dollar you would save. Easy enough. Once we know this one, and vice versa. So we showed our work. We came up with the answer. Show the effect of a decrease on our graph in number 1 or A. So anytime there's a decrease in consumer spending, we recognize that consumer spending, remember C plus I plus G plus X minus N equals aggregate demand. So if consumption goes down, aggregate demand has to go down. We're just going to draw in a new aggregate demand curve, show our new equilibrium being in a recession. Anytime aggregate demand moves to the left of full employment, we are in a recession. Y2, PL2, easy enough, right? You could label this 1 and 2 if you want to, but those arrows will get you the points for showing that short run effect, as does these numbers right here. So, cool, easy enough. All the answers, I think. Following the decrease in consumer spending, how the economy would adjust in the long run in the absence of any policy actions. This is a classical view, and this is how we understand our classical view. They tend to set this up by saying things like there's flexible prices and wages. If wages and prices can change immediately, it implies we have a classical view. They can say there's no fiscal, there's no monetary policy. That's exactly what they've done here. They just didn't write it all out as much as we've had them do it in the past. No policy actions means no fiscal, no monetary policy. They could have also told us that we have a vertical aggregate supply curve. That means classical also. They could have also said that the economy is self-adjusting. All four of these things, any of these things, would have let us know that it's a classical view. So we know we're in a recession. These are always done the same way for FRQs. Once you know how to answer these, it's the same thing again and again. I'm going to draw the graph because I like us to be able to see it. We need to show ourselves in a recession, short run aggregate supply. Here we are in a recession. You can see we're to the left of your long run aggregate supply. If that's full employment, right now we have less output. Let's call that Y1, or let's call it Y2 like above, and call it PL2. Price level on the vertical, real GDP always on the horizontal. So we are in a recession. The understanding is there's no fiscal policy, there's no monetary policy, so the government can't get involved, the Fed can't get involved. In essence, the economy will over time fix itself. That's the classical view understanding. So what we know is in a recession, people are out of work and people will take lower wages to go back to work. So if wage costs go down because people are willing to accept lower wages to go back to work, that is an input cost to businesses, meaning that this is one of the biggest costs to any business is wages. The other thing is input prices. Input prices being specifically in this instance, what we want to think about is material costs to build whatever you're building. If it was a car company, it'd be the steel, the rubber, the glass, etc., the electronics. Those are input prices. And in a recession, those material costs are falling. These two going down, these two are shifters of your short-run aggregate supply curve. So when wages go down and input prices go down, your short-run aggregate supply curve will shift to the right. So I'm going to shift that in right there. And the whole goal or understanding is that it self-adjusts back to full employment. So we return back to being fully employed, but we are at a lower price level. And this is always our answers for these, and they are always the same. If we're in a recession, wages fall, input prices fall, short run shifts back to the right. We go back to full employment at a lower price level. I don't change it. I don't make it any shorter. I don't add or take away anything to it. I mean, obviously, you can explain that people being out of work implies that they will take lower wages, and those lower wages, I mean, all of that's perfectly great for adding to. But this is the bulk and sort of the tightest way we can explain this. And of course, we'd want to write this out clearly for the AP readers so that they know exactly what we're talking about and can't misinterpret what we're saying. Cool. Easy enough. And these are always the same. Once you recognize it's classical, once you know we're in a recession, you know exactly what's happening. If we had been in an inflationary gap, everything would have flipped around here. Wages would have gone up, input prices would have gone up, short runs would have shifted to the left. We would have gone back to full employment at a higher price level. That would have been the only thing different if it was an inflationary gap. More information than you probably needed to know. But they tend to flip between recessions and inflation, so you should know how to say those both very clearly before you walk into that test. It'll save you. The earlier you do it, trust me, there's a lot of classical view questions, and there's a ton of multiple choice questions on classical view. So we need to know it in our head nice and tight. All right. D, the central bank of Moneyland is concerned about the short run effects of a decrease. The Fed, the central bank, right? Its monetary policy on the broader economy is considering taking actions rather than waiting for the long-run adjustment process, which is what we just showed. So the central bank gets involved, and the banking system has ample reserves. Now, that's fairly new. Last year was the first year. We had ample reserves, and I don't think we've ever had to draw a graph of that ample reserves on an FRQ. So this is the first year we've had to do that. Easy enough. Two things that I'm going to grab here for specific monetary policy actions that the central bank can use. One is what I call the AIR. This is the administered interest rate. And this has to go down in a recession. This is just an interest rate. Interest rates go down, they're going to be expansionary. Remember, we're in a recession. The whole point in a recession is to get us back to full employment. They want to push aggregate demand, the monetary policy. They want to push aggregate demand back to that full employment spot. The way they can do that is lower interest rates like the AIR. You could also put the IORB. The IORB is what we call the interest on reserve balances. Now, this interest on reserve balances is probably the main tool of the Fed, but what I've noticed is the College Board has used this as an answer more than anything else. Either one of these would have got you the points, but I'm going to go with what the College Board does when they do it 90% of the time. I'm running to them. We also know technically part of that AIR, part of those tools used by the Fed could be the discount rate, but I've never seen it used, so I'm not going to add it in. You're golden with either of these, and these are the two that I would run to. Most of the multiple choice questions I've ever seen are on AIR, IORB. Never seen any multiple choice questions on discount rate. Not saying they couldn't be there, but we tend to think of the discount rate when we're talking about limited reserves, not ample reserves. Again, when I see something different, or if we get the answers to these FRQs and they add in the discount rate as one of your choices, I'll come back and redo this video. But again, we should stick with what we know is always going to give us the right answer. And I like the AIR the best. That's going to be my choice. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the reserve market and show the effect of monetary policy actions on the policy reserves. So what we just recognize here is this is our ample reserves graph. This is supply of reserves, demand for reserves. You're drawing this Z here. This is policy rate on the vertical. And this is quantity of reserves over here on the horizontal. Let's just do that as QR. Now, we know the AIR is going down. This is going to drive down the policy rate. So we're going to show this kind of decrease here. Throw little arrows in here, tick, tick, tick across, tick, tick, tick across. You pretty much just have to know this off the top of your head. Oh, policy rate too. And just be able to draw this and just throw it up on the screen. If we have expansionary policy, we know to get us out of this recession. We know the AIR can go down. Let's just sort of run through it in our cause and effect scenario. A little further than we need to go, but I think it's important to see this. If the AIR goes down, that's expansionary. The IORB could have gone down. That's expansionary. Both of these are going to drive down that policy rate. That policy rate is technically what you and I would call the federal funds rate, which is what banks charge one another for short-term loans. So if the policy rate goes down, that is the federal funds rate. That's going down. Any of these going down is going to drive down what we call our nominal interest rates. Now we're off to the races. Once we know our nominal interest rates are going down, we know investment is going to go up. We know that's a determinant of aggregate demand. It's going to drive it up. That drives the price level up. That drives real GDP up, or let's say output. Put those together because sometimes questions use output. Sometimes they use real GDP. I put them together because you just have to be aware that they're the same thing. This is going to make unemployment go down, right? As we go back toward full employment, as it shifts aggregate demand back to the right, it's going to lower. This is why it's called expansionary monetary policy, right? It's expansionary monetary. It wants to get us back to full employment. That's the whole point. So that was a lot of words to get there, but all of this is stupidly important, not only for multiple choice questions, but obviously for FRQs. All right, last question here. How would the change in the policy rate affect each of the following money in the short run? In Moneyland. So the quantity of savings, well, let's think about that for a second. If the AIR goes down, it is an interest rate. It is going to end up pushing nominal interest rates lower. Would you rather put your money in a bank and make 20% or 2% on your money? Anytime we're talking about savings, people save more when interest rates are higher. When interest rates are 20%, if they were 20%, you can bet I'm going to start putting some money in the bank because I could make 20% on my money. If rates are 2% really low, I might not put that money in the bank. I might keep it out because I'm not losing as much by keeping it out. So I'm not really worried about that 2%. So if the AIR is going down, the nominal interest rate or the policy rate is going down, we know the nominal interest rates are going to be pushed down and there would be less savings. If I could, let's write it correctly. At least I get kind of sloppy here. Less national savings. People aren't going to be saving as much as those interest rates are pushed down. Unemployment, on the other hand, we've already sort of answered that with all of this up here. And they do want us to explain it, and we would explain it this exact way. We would say when those policy rates are pushed down, I would have explained that the policy rate is the federal funds rate, right? Or we could call it FFR. That can go down. As that goes down, it drives down the nominal interest rates. Again, if interest rates are low, people want to borrow money. They won't put money in the bank because they're not going to be paid for it. So they don't really care about putting money in the bank. But when you go to the bank and you want to borrow money, right? These are savers up here. Savers save less. But if I needed to borrow money, the lower the interest rate, the cheaper that loan's going to be for me to take out of the bank. So when interest rates go down, investment goes up. If investment goes up, you and I know that drives aggregate demand up, which is going to drive up the price level, which drives up real GDP and output, and therefore drives down unemployment. What I've noticed about all of our FRQs, if you're explaining unemployment, you have to talk about real GDP and output. That's what they do. That's what we're going to do. You probably could have left off the price level. But if you're talking about what's driving real GDP and output, you have to talk about aggregate demand. If you're talking about aggregate demand, you need to talk about a determinant of aggregate demand, which again would be that C plus I plus G plus XN. That I is that investment right there, right? So if investment goes up, you and I know aggregate demand is going to go up also. Nominal interest rates are what kicked off that investment going up, and all of this is what started off the whole party in the first place. So this is about as tight as you can understand it in your brain, and I keep this in my brain nice and tight. Obviously, after the summer, I have to relearn it because I'm old and I forget things like I've got Alzheimer's. But anyway, I have to come back and do this because it makes me get it tight in my brain. And then, of course, you wouldn't explain it like this or write it out like this on a test. You'd write it out in a way that the College Board wants to see it written out. But this is ultimately all of your answer right here. All right, guys, good job. Keep working hard. You're doing great. Be safe.